give it a couple minutes. Okay, I will call the Board of Selectmen special meeting to order at 7:02. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a deadline. Sorry for the special meeting, but we do have a deadline of tomorrow, I think, to get this to the Board of Finance. So we need to pass it along. We've been over it. Are there any changes that the board is looking to do or make?
Changes I made, Jeff, just we reduced the selectmen's line by $100,000, which was the HR consultant, and then we added 40, I believe, to the fiscal line. So that's just the offset between the HR consultant from the selectmen's office to the fiscal office, the position that was approved. We also reduced the labor line, the medical insurance, by $100,000 based upon the quotes that we just received from United Healthcare. And the Board of Finance will be voting on that next week to make a change from the region to fully insured. That will save us $100,000. So those are the two changes that were made since the last meeting.
So these next two changes reduce the budget.
It's down to 3.2%.
With the change in that and the insurance.
That 3.2 is, it's 2.95 for municipal, right?
Oh, okay. Where's the 2 point?
Municipal 2.95.
Okay.
And with that, I believe the mill rate right now is 29, is what we're looking at.
So it would be a reduction in the mill rate with this budget, depending on what Board of Finance does with revenues and any changes. Okay. Any other questions of the budget?
So there's portions of the budget currently that take into account certain ARPA funds that are going to be used for certain things. So therefore, we were able to reduce debt payments or do some other stuff because we're going to utilize ARPA funds for things like buying police radios or stuff like that. Given that, one of the ideas I had today, and I called Dan and I did not have a chance to touch base with you, so I was wondering if, I had a question about one of the ARPA proposals, which not everyone has seen yet because the ARPA task force is meeting Thursday. One of the proposals is to allocate $1 million of ARPA funding to bridges. And my question for Dan, and Dan will be able to explain it better than me, was what impact that has on our budget, if any, given the way we reserve and spend for bridges.
Yeah, by taking that $1 million out of the bridge reserve, it won't affect the budget whatsoever because we're going to fund $250,000 for the bridges regardless. So that 250 is going to be budgeted. We don't budget the $1 million, we budget 250. So that 250 is budgeted. So if we take the $1 million out or leave it in, it doesn't affect the budget whatsoever.
So one of the thoughts I had was, if the bridge allocation from ARPA is not going to benefit us or our taxpayers long-term, if we just fund the bridges out of our bridge reserve plan like we would normally do in the ordinary course, whether we could reallocate that $1 million and instead do something like take 250,000 of it and pay for the new drainage program this year, where we don't know, it's a big unknown, what the drainage program is, what it's gonna be going forward, how much we're gonna need to fund it next year, and it's gonna be, a lot of legwork on the front end to determine what the next stage is gonna be. So I was wondering, in one instance, whether that would be a feasible thing to do, is reallocate that $250,000 in this budget from the drainage program to the ARPA funds instead of using it on bridges, which isn't going to help us long-term budget-wise.
All right,
Because we're still gonna do the bridges. That was-
we're gonna do bridges.
That was one of my questions that I brought up today.
Yeah, and in doing that, we would, that would have an impact on reducing the budget, unlike the $1 million for the bridges.
So you're talking about moving $250,000, I thought I could have heard you wrong, from the drainage fund.
The new drainage program that's in this budget,
Zero that out?
yes. And instead, fund year one, or even maybe year two, I mean, we can see how it goes for the first year, because we don't need to approve ARPA funds until ultimately 2024. Fund year one of the drainage program out of ARPA, which would reduce this budget by $250,000. Instead of funding $1 million for bridges, which is not gonna have a budgetary impact on us, and our bridges are already funded and paid for. That, just trying to use that money for some of, some relief, really, when you have a bad, we have inflationary pressures, we have additional personnel, minimum wage increases, other things in the budget. I was just wondering if that was feasible to shift the money and use different pots, this pot being one that helps the taxpayers.
So so the only thing I do want to say is I'm not sure, Dan, when would we be able to, with approval, be able to spend those ARPA monies on the drainage? The reason I say that is I know that they want to get going on this drainage to get a handle on what it's about, what it is, and frankly, I think there's a chance that it could require more than the 250, but we do have roads that need that 250. So my question is, when can we get on that program with the ARPA money?
I think, Jeff, as soon as the Board of Selectmen approves the spending that we're gonna put forth this week, the ARPA Task Force, I think then we could start spending. We got $2.8 million from the state last May, out of which we've allocated 1.5 for the radios. So, and then we're getting another 2.8 this May. So we're gonna have all of the $5.6 million in the bank at the end of May of this fiscal year. So the money will be there if we wanted to spend it, even if we wanted to allocate it this fiscal year for drainage.
So we could probably spend it even earlier than this budget.
We could
This
spend it
budget.
this fiscal year and then spend $250 next fiscal year, because we're gonna have the full allocation of the ARPA funds by June 1st.
So yeah, again, as far as I'm concerned, I think this board would similarly agree. Whatever we do, Southbury's never been short on doing the right thing just because it benefits a mill rate or a tax increase or whatever. We need to make sure we're working on this drainage, and it's really unknown at this time if there's a huge drainage problem or a small drainage problem. That's why we don't want to put it off. There's been some people who've said, well, why don't you wait till you know? We know we have $250,000 worth of drainage issue right now that we need to take care of. And I don't want to, as long as I know we're on top of that. We don't like to let our drainage go, just like we don't want to let with our roads. This is a new issue and we want to stay on top of it. I think it's, as long as, if it works on this budget, it lowers, and again, I'm not going to sit here and try and lower a percentage increase just because I'm in office. You know, I want that clear. We're either gonna do it right and make sure it's done right and make sure we're doing the right thing over the long period of time for the town of Southbury and its citizens, and it's proven to work. And if Dan feels that 250,000 out of the million into the drainage, when we do the ARPA, lowering this by 250 in this, I can support that. Is that what you're saying, Dan, when it's?
I believe that is probably the right way to go with the ARPA funds, based upon the fact if we took the million out of bridges, it would have zero impact on the budget. So I agree with what Jason's saying, is that, you know, that if we can allocate that 250 and start the drainage account now with the ARPA funds, and then that would reduce this road budget by $250,000.
And I think by next budget cycle, we should have a better understanding.
That's one of my thoughts. is
Yeah.
Right now, we're sort of almost shooting in the dark. We don't know what the long-term drainage plan is gonna have to be. We'll know a lot more a year from now. And we'll still have more ARPA money too. Like, I think this is a way that actually opens up more funding for drainage if it becomes an issue. Like, the money will be available sooner than July 1. And if you determine you need more than 250 this year, there's that opportunity at least. But the main reason I brought it up was because of a discussion we had in the budget workshop about bridges, and we had this whole discussion about whether, you know, I think it was about the lanes of bridges or whatever it was, about the bridges and how much it impacted the reserve fund. And then when I saw $1 million for bridges in the ARPA proposal, that's what triggered my question to Dan, of what impact does that have? What benefit is there to spending ARPA money on that? And if it's gonna keep our budgetary reserve spending into the bridge account the same over a long period of time, then why not use that $1 million a different way? As we have with the radios and other things that have, you know, helped us.
John, do you have any question on what's proposed?
So I guess my question on ARPA funds and moving them and putting them somewhere else is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a committee that's working on how to spend ARPA funds, and are we now going to be taking those funds to spend them on something that that they weren't earmarked for?
So this was actually one of the proposals that the Public Works Director made to the ARPA task force, was on drainage. And then the fiscal office and First Selectmen's office put together proposals based on everything that we've seen. And the one reason I'm comfortable bringing it up tonight, just to see if anyone has any objections, is most of the members of the ARPA task force are in the room right now. So if someone had a strong objection on that body, we would hear it and then say, oh, well, let's not do that because, you know, then maybe the money won't be there, you know, if the ARPA task force goes a different way. So that's, you know, another reason why I wanted to bring it up now, because if that's, you know, if we can sort of preview that and see where we're going, personally, I think it's a better use of the money.
So also, I think, John, part of this is there's different, ARPA task forces serve many different spots for many different reasons. But part of the ARPA money being used for is long-term, which is the bridges. And drainage is the same thing. I don't have a problem either way. I'm making sure our infrastructure long-term is good. No different than making sure our roads were long-term, we're in good shape with the roads, and we've proven that that helps the community, because once we got the roads up, we were able to reduce the overall budget by how much? 800? What was the road budget came down last year?
It was about $800,000.
Right. So we know that these programs work as long as we maintain we can't turn our back on our infrastructure. That's the main thing. And biggest expenses we have is our public works and infrastructure. So I don't have a problem which way it goes, as long as that part of the ARPA money goes in for our infrastructure for long term.
So those ARPA funds would be used for the drainage,
250.
clearing up some budget out of, some dollars out of this year's budget.
Right, 250 in the drainage, which will reduce the proposed $1 million into the bridges down to 750. And we'll still be in the same place. And this will relieve some more pressure between the adjustments Dan proposed here and that we would, what would that bring it, by doing that, what would it bring this down to?
Go to the budget sheet.
So we can see it,
Actually, if you just go to the budget.
It's on the front sheet.
Over to the right, all the way to the right, and then under Board of Selectmen, down where it says 250, the second
Right here?
250.
The next one,
The next one?
the next
Yeah,
250.
The next one, two down.
Do you wanna do it up close? I think it was
Just
one
tell
of
us
you.
through here, I don't mind.
I think you need to see how it works on the, it'll carry it all through.
There it is right there. So it brings the total budget down to 2.88, and the municipal budget is down to 1.85.
So your municipal budget will be a 1.85?
85.
It's a zero.
1.8.
1.80, sorry.
1.80 municipal increase. Overall budget with the school budget included at 2.88, is that it?
Yes. And if you go to the mill rate, you can see what the effect would be on there also, Betsy. So what is that, 29? 28.9, so 29 mils.
And we're currently at 29.3.
29.3.
So will be a mill rate reduction. A mill rate reduction of minus 1.32, is that what we're seeing?
It would be a reduction of almost 3 mils, Jess.
Of almost how much?
0.3 of a mil.
0.3 of a mil.
So assuming the fiscal director thinks that this is sound budgeting, I'll make a motion to remove the 250,000 drainage line item with the understanding that we'll be doing it with ARPA funds.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
And then I'll just say, we'll all know on Thursday, if the ARPA task force, rejects that idea, then we can go to the Board of Finance, and there's plenty of time for them to correct it, but I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Well, frankly, I think with what's going on in the world right now and the pressures on families and working families, I think this, Jason's your idea, it makes a lot of sense, and I do appreciate everybody input because we can't see everything, and that's why we put a lot of eyes on this. If it gives a little more relief to our taxpayers during these uncertain times, again, so long as we're not damaging long-term stability of the town.
And I agree, Jeff. I think so long as like Jason said, this Thursday, the task force, which it's you and Jason, Justin, myself, Dick and Claire, as long as we keep it in. As for the drainage, I think we'll get all the drainage covered and we'll get it started earlier. We'll get it started this year as opposed to waiting until next fiscal year, which I think will make our Public Works Director happy also because he's getting ready to get started on this. He's ready to go.
Okay,
So
anybody
I
else?
guess, yeah, so
John?
the question I would have is basically, if we're giving ourselves an easier budget season or financial season this year and using some ARPA funds to do that, and so it's kind of like we're taking away from the ARPA funds to help our budget, which I don't know if ARPA was intended for that, but would it make sense to, I mean, we're still staying at that same mill rate and still staying in that same neighborhood. I mean, we had some, people here that were asking for additional resources, whether it's the police department, an extra seat on their force, or the Southbury seniors who are, you know, tight on how many buses that are rolling and or the ease of use, not having the kiosks so they can have a welcome center. Is there a way, something that we can do to keep the budget where it was, use those funds to do those services that those people wanted, and then the public works work comes out of the ARPA, and basically we're using ARPA for what it was intended for, and we're providing the services that the folks were looking for.
Well, I think what we need to do, we have a motion on the table, and we should vote on that first, because before we, whatever more discussions on the budget. So I have the motion, I'll call the motion, call for vote. All in favor? Aye.
No.
One nay, and it passes. Okay, so that's made the adjustment. So is there something else in the budget to be discussed that you want to discuss?
Yep, so if we could discuss, and however I motion that, or to add what the police captain was asking for and what
We
Thomas
don't have
was
a
asking
captain.
for. Whatever
What
the
the
sergeant was looking for.
And what did you want to do?
So he was asking for an additional seat, right? He said that his force would be at,
Do you know what that'll cost?
it was, he was at 22 seats. Where's my number here?
He's currently at 24, John.
24 officers. We're currently, how many do we have on staff right
Well,
now?
we're currently budgeted for 23.
Currently
The
budgeted for
proposal
23.
Is for 24, which is in the budget, and the police, we're asking for 25.
25, right.
And I
So would
propose,
this give us the opportunity to let him build his staff the way he was hoping to?
the way,
That the police force was asking to staff their force.
okay,
And to add the 25th is about $128,000
with
medical.
medical and with the uniforms and with, is about $128,000. If we can fill that, if it is even, with the number of hires we're doing right now, if we're able to do that. So are you making a motion?
I'm making a motion.
Okay. Any second?
I'll second it to discuss it, but,
We have a second open for discussion?
but I'm not sure I'm sold on it, John. You know, it's tough to get, it's gonna be tough to get to 24, within this next fiscal year. So, you know, to budget that 25th, I mean, sure, you know, I mean, we wanna see our police fully staffed and, make sure that they have the resources they need to keep us safe, there's no question, and, you know, a number of us have fought for extra cops over the years. But this is the first year that we've been at a number as high as 24, and I'm comfortable with it at 24. So,
I also believe, John, that the way frankly, when I came into office back in 2015, there was only 17 officers on. So I'm trying to, it takes a little bit of time. I mean, it's not just a matter of actually just adding bodies and numbers. That's a way of looking at it from a simplistic side. But I believe as we add our officers, they get seasoned, they get time under their belt, they settle in, and then move up. That's why, and with the police accountability bill, I recognize the immediate impact of hours, man time, that's gonna, I don't know if that's politically correct today, but man time, man hours to administer that. I also think that we're gonna have an influx of a number of officers we're working on right now. You have to be careful about overweighting with new people on a department like that and structuring it.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, my experience, you know, managing lumberyards was that as you were looking for truckers, as you were looking for staff in the yards, staff on the counters, that if, it's always tough to find the right person and get them plugged in. And if that's the reason we're not filling that spot, it's then just makes it harder when that 23 that we wish was 24 becomes 22 or 20. So if we know the target is 25, and that's the goal and that's the objective, and as we strive for it, now maybe we don't get to the 25th officer and get that person on board until, towards the end of the fiscal season, maybe we just don't get there. So at that point, it would be money that wasn't spent, still left in their budget, but it was a goal, it was an objective, it was a mindset of giving us some direction on where we want to go, but at the same time, giving the police officers the knowledge that we're thinking about them and that we do want to help them. And so that if we can figure out a way to make it come together, then that 25th officer would be on somewhere along the line. Now, I do believe, like I think we've all been talking about, is you have attrition coming up, you have people dropping out, so we might get to that 25 and it's gonna come back to 24 again. But at least if we have a goal and a strategy and a mindset,
So
I think
we
it's a
do
strong-
look at the who's up for retirement, who could be retiring, and understand that in every police department, it's very unusual to hit the full staff of what the budget amount is. So there's always a float in there with retirements and replacements and the time it takes to do that. And I'm comfortable with the 24. I think the town is safe. I think we've been operating pretty well. So that's why I brought.
Like, I know the up in the village, that where the liaison that was there, Officer Burke, I think it is, that is, out on disability, their comfort level and the folks that were there and knew that they had somebody that they knew their name, a community police officer that could check in, and they knew he was around, they knew who he was, he's not there anymore. And there are a couple other, so if we're down to 22 or 23, adding in to look for 25, and we get to 24, 23, then the folks who were comfortable with, a local liaison going up to the village will be comfortable that officer is there for them.
Okay, anybody else? I'll call the vote. I'm sorry?
No, I would just say one thing. I think Justin makes some good points on this. Just given where we are right now with our staffing, though this is something that I have advocated for and fought for every budget year since I've been sitting on this board. One thing that I'm really happy about this budget is that we are adding a police officer, because I think it's long overdue, and it's getting us up to a place where we need to be. And I'd like to have we did this a couple of years ago, where we tried to add an officer, and my sort of vision in my mind was we add an officer, and then the year after we would add another officer. And perhaps that's sort of what we do here, is get to 24 and then get to 25. Another way to do it is to add half an officer, like on the back end of the budget year, because it is highly unlikely. It's just the reality of the situation. It's highly unlikely that we're going to be able to, with attrition and people we're hiring now, that we're going to be able to get to 25 in this budget year entirely, which means we're going to be overtaxing the residents by a significant amount of money on this line item. And that's my concern, though I very much want to add officers. And I know the Board of Finance, it's something they're willing to fund, and I'm just wondering if there's a way we can get to a point, even if the budget's at 24, if we get a good candidate, if we just bring them to the boards and fund it, even if it's not in the budget, with other funds throughout the year or whatnot. So those are just sort of my general thoughts on it. I too would like to see it at 25. I'm just not sure that it's going to be, that we're going to be able to, I think I'm confident, based on all the conversations I've had, that we would not fill all the positions for the entirety of the budget year, so there'll be a lot of leftover money on this. What I'd like to see is perhaps and understanding that if that's the case, as time goes through the budget year and we have money, perhaps as we look to the next budget year, we can hire at the end of this budget year to get it up to a 25th officer with the money that we already have in the line. I mean, the line is, the overall line is a full number. You get to that number by adding up all the officers that get to that number, right? But if you have a vacant position, or 3 vacant positions, or 5 vacant positions for 3-4 months, you've now paid for another officer that you can add to the list at the back end of the budget year. So,
I think there's mechanisms within the budget that,
right.
if that happens, there's ways to do things like that.
So what I would like to see is perhaps not increase the funding on this line, but perhaps have an understanding of this body that we can try to achieve moving towards a force with 25 officers, if not this year, next year, and we can use money in the budget that's already there to pay for those officers as we hire and as there's attrition in this coming year. And because I agree, I'd like to see it at 25. I'm talking more now about how to fund it and how not to overburden the taxpayers for money that we're not gonna spend on the front end of the budget year. That's my thought.
Also understand that as we look to hiring officers, like we went out, someone one time said, let's get 6 officers. So you have a pool that's available at the time you do it. You want to pick from this end here, not this end here. So sometimes, so what you do is you get what you, like, we brought 3 in. We let time go by and then looked again, which was another new pool, if you will, a new pool, and pick. And if you are certainly, I think that the officers we hired have been very well received. The community recognizes that they're good officers, they fit our community. So now you're in, I think we're looking at this number, you're gonna need to let some time go by to get another pool of people interested. It used to be you had a big pool. It's more difficult now. Again, for the sake of just structuring and just putting bodies in, you can end up with a whole lot of headaches that you're not looking for. So it's a little more to doing this than the simplicity of just adding a body to the number. So there's a motion and a second, a discussion. The motion would put another officer on that line. An affirmative vote would do that. A nay would not be adding it to the budget, just so that all the selectmen are understand. All those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Nay? Nay.
Nay.
It does not pass. Any other discussions on the budget?
I have a couple questions. You know, in regards to the pool, so they're gonna take the top off it in a couple weeks. We're gonna know if we squeezed another year out or if we're in deep doo, right? So we have talked about, using ARPA money at one point, which is not on the table anymore. And we have talked about putting it into a bonding package, potentially with police radios and some other things, but we don't need to do that bonding package right now, from what I can tell, because the police radios are gonna be ARPA money, right? Do we have money in reserves if this thing goes south?
We have $2.1 million already allocated for Edgewood, which would go to the pool. And if, Betsy, if you go to the debt service line, we do have a debt package, which is a bonding package together. That's, debt. And if you click on the, so Justin, if you see there, those are the items that we put in. So we have the transfer station redesign, which is $1.2 million. We took out the cameras because we're going to do that this year with the ARPA funds. We took out the radios because we're doing it with ARPA funds. We have $2.5 million for Ballantyne Pool. That with the 2.1 is the 4.5 that we've been getting kind of roundabout quotes on it if we wanted to do it. And by doing so, we could do all those projects with having zero effect on the mill rate whatsoever, based on that.
But the pool, so with the 2.1 million, then what I'm hearing here is that the expectation is this could be $4.6 million for the pool.
When are we gonna get those numbers back?
Well,
We just got the contract back from our attorney looking at it from Silver Petrocelli, so he's gonna
Yeah, I
start
just
working
signed it
Yeah,
today.
just signed it today.
yeah, so it's gonna be a little bit, but again, there, you know, so what we're doing is we're saying, I mean, here is a board in that bond package and the reserve, essentially saying that's a $4.6 million pool. And there's those here who have said that that pool wouldn't cost $4.6 million, that it would be 2.5. This is $4.6 million. This is $4.6 million is what this board is saying they expect that pool to cost, when there's been board members who have said it's not gonna cost that much. Just wanna remind everybody. Okay? Just a reminder. Anybody have any issues with the bond package of the 2.5 million on that bond package? Added to this $4.6 million.
Yeah, we did, if you look at the debt servicing on that, we did a 20-year bond, so it's $438,000 debt servicing every year for that. And that way we can do all of those projects if we wanted to right now, and we'd have zero effect on the mill rate. And John, you had a question about the buses. We did just get the grant, so we're gonna have the 5th bus. We got the 5310 grant, so the state is gonna provide the bus to town. It's a $71,000 bus. I believe the town's
80, isn't it? 79 point,
79 point.
almost 80,000 for
Almost
the
an
bus.
$80,000 bus. The town is gonna pay $940 total. So we will have the full fleet of buses.
So
in the
that'll
parking lot.
bring buses up to, I mean, if we want them, 5 buses.
The issue we're gonna have is, as we have every year, where everyone has is drivers. You know, it's getting drivers.
Yeah, most of the time, there's 2 buses out, maybe sometimes 3, so. Justin, you have any other questions on?
No.
My main other thing stemmed from the discussion with Dan earlier about the ARPA and whatnot. Dan brought up some other ideas as well. Maybe he can articulate those on the capital budget.
The other idea that I had thought, and you know, after Jason had spoken to me, was in the capital budget we have a couple of items. We have a feasibility study from Kevin, our EDC director, of $20,000, and we have a $75,000 traffic signal camera in lieu of the loop. And I thought, and just thinking for you guys to think about, is could we also allocate some ARPA funds to cover those 2 projects as well, and move those off the capital item?
Allocated out of what?
Capital and then use the ARPA funds.
So what are the projects, I mean, this is,
So if we took, let's say we took, instead of 250 from the bridges, Jeff, we took 300, which would cover these 2 items as well, or 350, which would give us 650 for the bridges, and then take these 2 items off the capital. Doing so, I don't.
which 2 items out of the capital?
So it'd be the feasibility study for Volpe Rosen, this $20,000, which is one of the things we had discussed. Kevin had come to the ARPA meeting. One of the things we did discuss was possibly doing that. And then the other one would be the traffic loop, the cameras that we want to do on Main Street South for the traffic control.
Personally, I'm okay with the feasibility study. And not that we can discuss it here, but because Kevin's gonna do an RFP for Volpe Rosen to put out to see what comes back. So I'm not sure the feasibility study is, we need to know we can do it, but I don't need to know, and I'm not sure if it's gonna be happening if the RFPs come back. And I think that's gonna be the first step, is the RFPs coming back, so I'm comfortable with that. You know, we're making changes really, as the game shortens here, it's shortening up here because we have to deliver. So the traffic cameras, they're $75,000. And we were just gonna put 75,000 in because of the number of cameras that needed to be done, and we wanted to get them all done at one time. Because we're hoping to put the whole project together rather than do one project and then have them come back and do another project. Hopefully it'll be less money to do the projects all in one shot and get it done.
Oh, so with that, so on the cameras, there's 3 in this year's budget, there's 6 altogether, right? And did we do that for budgetary reasons, to do 3 and 3, or did we do it for other reasons?
No, when we met with the Public Works Director, he said it would work out better if they did 3 this year and 3 next year. That's why we did it that way. So we could actually take all 6 cameras and put them in ARPA, 3 this year and 3 next year.
Or take next year's 3, or this year's?
Yep.
So it's budgeted for doing 3, we really need to do 6. We're gonna do 3 and 3. The question is, do you do 3 out of ARPA this year and not have, and how much will that, that's 75,000, how much is it really gonna change?
It's de minimis.
Yeah. I don't think it's gonna make a big impact. I think we should just leave it and let, because we're still dealing with needs from the ARPA side. So I think, I don't really think it's gonna move the needle and make a big impact to the taxpayers, either way. And the only, I mean, the first thing we would, you know, we're discussing it, but if anybody feels that we should do that, we would need a motion. I'm not recommending it, because it's not gonna move the needle. What we did, or just did, it did move the needle. This is not gonna really move the needle. Do we have anything else?
Did have a couple questions about, so as the different commissioners and folks were here, they were asked to, in some cases, provide additional information or to add in some details on reserves. Was that all accomplished, or did we get the answers that we were looking for?
We're waiting on, we did get the drainage study from Jerry, and I could send it out to everyone, the breakdown of the year. We are still waiting on the health district, on some information from them. We have not received all that yet.
So some of this is gonna be left to the Board of Finance. If something comes in, they make the final changes. But we, by charter, have to get this to them now. So, though we have to wait, we can't, you know, we can't force them to, but that information will come. It's not this is not the final end game. It could be, but there's still, the Board of Finance makes the final decision. And depending on that, they were looking for that information. And if the public is listening, or there's reporters in the room, if we don't have the information back, we really can't do anything here.
So I guess, just as a comment, that's one of my uncomfortable parts of, you know, where I am a little uncomfortable at this point, is that there was a lot of comments during our workshop of, you know, oh, we did this last year, and we're doing it again, and we never got the answers, and we're still just moving forward. So just a little uncomfortable with that. So I would have liked to seen the answers or heard more about it, but so
You
be
certainly
it.
will see it, and you know, I'm sure if the Board of Finance heard, but they're the ones asking the questions. They make the final decision.
And
So,
then the last thing I did have, one more question?
yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So with the Housatonic Valley Health District, I mean, we were talked to them quite a bit. We had our board members here and talked to them a bit. And then I just started looking at like a map that shows like New Milford, like 28,000 residents to our 17,000. And it does look like the weight of the population in this health district would be kind of drifting a little north. And I was curious, before we approve a budget and put that money aside for that health district, is there something we could do to, or what I'm asking is, can we put that money in a reserve or in a side budget that we can then release as they make commitments to keeping these buildings or offices in Southbury? So make our budget line contingent upon them retaining offices in Southbury. And the reason I ask that is because right now, when you go to a map and you look for Housatonic Valley Health District, you know where it pinpoints it, right? New Milford. That's where it is on the map.
So from a statutory standpoint, we are members of the health district and we're obligated to pay them. If they don't get the information to us, we can certainly have discussions with them about that, but I don't think we can change. They have to get funded because that's state statute. We can talk to our attorney, but at this point, I would say probably not. We're welcome to leave the health district, is what I'm told. And there's a statutory requirement of when you have to notify them. But in the meantime, they're still providing services. And other than being able to look at their finances, and there's not a lot we can do. Yeah, I don't think we can put a contingency on.
So I guess my understanding was that it could be quarterly, semi-annual, just something that we put a leash on it. And if we get to revisit who our health department is over the next couple of months, then we have the opportunity to do that.
But we're still obligated to pay until we give them notice. Dan?
And we can pay them semi-annually, John. That's what we would do.
We do that now.
We do that now.
Yeah, but we do have to pay them. Yeah.
So, just looking at these maps and looking at the service and I'm hearing what you were saying the other day, but I think we're a little waters under that bridge already, and I think we need to catch up.
Yeah. Okay. Justin, you look like you have a question?
No.
You're all set?
No.
Okay, we have to change that number? Betsy, if I can be so rude as just to want to double check that number? It's, I just, yeah, thank you, I just don't. That's why.
2196808.
Send the right budget over.
2196808, yes.
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the fiscal year 23 budget.
Can I have a second by Justin or John?
I'll make a second. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this?
Just for the notes stated, mentioned, I'm just a little uncomfortable with not having the answers back, not feeling comfortable with the health district, and would have rathered help out the police department a little bit and to get the kiosk for the senior center.
Okay.
So,
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
no.
John Deal is opposed, and it carries. Any other motions? To adjourn?
Now let's stay.
John Deal accepted it, and all in favor? Aye. And we're adjourned. Thank you.